Views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of alltalkradio.net.
Mother Nature has the answer to all the things we need. It is in the purest waters which flow out to the sea. You will
and welcome everybody to the Zenus Hour. Good to have you with us. And our special guest today is Don Vaca. Don is a dear friend of mine. We go back quite a ways, but before we get started, I just want to dedicate this show to one of my heroes, BB. BB just celebrated her 17th birthday, and Don knows BB, and she's kind of our mascot here at Zenus.
Miracle dog.
Miracle dog. She, for those of you that don't know the story, when the Whitfields adopted her, she was quite young, I think a year or so, and it was obvious after a short period of time she was starting to go downhill. They took her into an expert, and they did all the blood tests, and he said, I don't know how this little girl is still alive. Her liver count's 3,300. And so he said, there really isn't a lot we can do. She's not long for this world. So they had her a couple weeks, and they had already bonded with her, and so they took the news pretty hard, a lot of tears. And they took her home, and they said, you know, what do we have to lose at this time? So they started her on the yucca drops and the SEACT, and the results were almost immediate. The information about BB's on our website, and within a week or two, her liver count had returned almost to normal. And that was about 15, 16 years ago. She just celebrated her 17th birthday. So
yeah, healthy dogs don't usually go 17 years.
Yeah, and
like
she is a little princess. I just love her, and she's in the office. For those of you that want to meet BB in person, just stop by the Zenus office. She's here every day, and she's a sweetheart. But I'm glad you can join me. I've been after you to come over here for a while, and I'm glad you could finally join us now. Tell us how we met. You and I go back a few years now.
Yeah, I think we were feeding the homeless together.
Yeah.
A bunch of us would get together, go on some side street.
Right.
It wasn't even promoted by anyone.
No.
We'd put out the food, pull up in our trucks.
Yeah.
And these people, I think it was every Wednesday, they would come
every Wednesday.
out.
I think they're still doing it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they just come out in droves, and it was fun.
Reverend Davis would cook it up with his wife Ginny, and last I heard, they're still doing that.
And were wonderful people. There was so many characters there.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah, we had fun.
Yeah. I remember my favorite was Sal.
Yeah,
and we always had a laugh because Sal would summer in
Utah.
Salt Lake. We wouldn't see Sal. He'd be around all winter, and
he'd hop on the back of a train.
Yeah, he would.
It was too hot in Vegas.
Yeah, and Sal would summer in Salt Lake. We always had a good laugh, and it was always great to see him.
And he knew where to sleep, and I remember lights would turn on in certain stores, so he knew what time it was.
Yeah.
He was a character.
Great guy. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in health and healing?
I don't know. I was talking to you before, and it's kind of like I went against my upbringing, my background. I grew up with an Italian diet. Candy bars were a big part of my life. And I don't know, some days something just hit me one day. And as I was saying, it's almost like I'm very strange. I consider it a gift, and there's no way I'm bragging about this, but it's like I have a hard time putting anything in my body that I don't think is good for it.
Yeah.
I have no idea where that came from, Bobby.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you a little bit about, what got me interested, and I can't remember a single incident that started my interest in it, other than my grandmother and I used to talk. My mother and father are kind of into the traditional medicine. They take a drug for this, a drug for that, and so on and so forth. But my grandma, my mom's mom, lived to 104, rarely had any use for hospitals or doctors, and she always had a herbal remedy, or what they call a folk remedy. And it's funny, it's like it skipped a generation somehow, and people our age seem to be a little more open than our parents to the natural world, which is kind of interesting.
Well, the funny part about my parents, I mean, thank God they're both, one's 95, my dad's 99 in February.
Yeah.
So I would always, I lived in California, they were in New York, I'd always come back with something healthy that I was eating. And my mom would say to me, when you get to be my age, you could tell me what to eat. You can't argue with that.
No, right. So, you were telling me a little bit about some of the, it's called The Work.
The
And
Work.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? It sounds fascinating.
The work of Byron Katie.
Yeah.
So Byron Katie was a woman, I would say 25 years ago. She was living in Barstow, California, a little desert town not far from Vegas here. And she was addicted to prescription drugs. She was obese, and I believe she was even an alcoholic. So they put her in like a halfway house or rehab place. And one morning she wakes up on the floor, and there was a bug on her foot. I think it was a roach. And that's significant because that was her first moment of awareness. The 44 years before that, she had no memory of it. They would say, this is your husband, and she almost didn't understand the language. She goes, what's a husband? And from that was created this thing called The Work, which is basically questioning our beliefs, questioning our thoughts. So, you know, in my mind, I consider her an enlightened master. In her mind, she's a clear woman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and back in the day, I was fortunate enough to travel with her, spent a lot of alone time on a plane with her. I feel so fortunate.
So how far back does this go, when
Well,
you got introduced to her?
16 years ago, I
No
think
kidding.
it was. 98, yeah, 2014. It was 16 years ago. And I was living in New York, and I heard of this woman who was supposedly awake. And
Yeah.
I wasn't even that clear what that meant.
Right.
So I get on a plane, and I go out to Barstow, California. And I went to a workshop. It was just 3 little houses. She bought 3 houses in a row. We would sleep like, 6 people to a room with sleeping bags.
Really?
And then there was a big room where we actually did the work. So for 2.5 days, I sat there looking at these people having these breakthroughs. And since I was kind of a skeptical New Yorker, I just thought, man, these guys are good actors. It's
Yeah.
like, how could they let this all come up, So on the last day, I raised my hand and I said, I want to do the work. So the best way to describe what the work is really just to go through the story, and it'll show it. The work is 4 questions and a turnaround. In fact, there's a little rhyme. It goes, judge your neighbor, write it down, ask 4 questions, turn it around. So that's a little rhyme so you can remember what it is. So judge your neighbor. So you always do this outside of yourself, at least when you first start. You could do it on your mate, your workers, people you work with, just people who annoy you, something that's creating stress in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really good thing. Like, I do it on my wife a lot. I've done it on my mother a lot. And it just...
And if it's done with love and tact, it doesn't come across as you're trying to fix them.
Well, I'll go through it, because the reality is it has nothing to do with them.
Oh,
So-
okay. It has to do with you.
Always.
Yeah.
It's all about perception. If you and I met for the first time and there was another person here,
Yeah.
you could say, oh, Don's a nice guy, and this person could look at me and think I'm a jerk. So I said the same thing to both of you at the exact same time. You have a perception of me that I'm a nice guy because you're seeing what's nice in me and yourself. This other gentleman seeing what's a jerk in him and me.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all about perception.
It's all about the mirror effect.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'll say this again a couple of times while we're talking today. This is so simple that most people cannot believe this can work.
Yeah.
Katie used to say, the only complaint I have that how could something so simple be so powerful?
And so what is she doing today? Do you know?
Today, boy, back in the day we used to go there, and then she sold the houses, and then I remember a lot of times going up the coast of California and stopping at community centers and unity churches and people's houses. And, since then, she's written a couple of books. She was on that Oprah series for a while
Oh,
for
was
the
she?
summer. So she's got quite a following. She's,
Mhm.
you can see her on YouTube.
And she's still available, like if
She's
people
still-
wanted to bring her in as a speaker or a facilitator, or do you have to go to her?
Well, what she does is, and she's still doing it, she offers schools throughout the world, and I was fortunate enough to be like facilitating and staffing 7 of those. And you could go there, it's a 9-day course, it's pretty intense, and it'll change your life. The work has changed my life,
Yeah.
you know.
So do you do facilitating yourself now? I know that you're involved with a local yoga studio now.
Yeah, and mostly, I mean, I do Bikram yoga, which is just a wonderful thing to do, and
Yeah.
it's that hot yoga, and
Yeah.
you know, you detox yourself and sweat.
Right.
I'm still a stiff old man, but I love it, and I pick up clients that way.
Right.
You know, the thing about the work, and I do want to get back to telling the story.
Yeah.
So I did go to that workshop with Katie. So I sat there, and on the last day, I raised my hand and said, I want to go do the work. So I go in front of 70 people sitting face to face with Katie, kind of like you and I are right now. And I wrote down the work. So it's like, judge your neighbor. So the neighbor was my mom. You know, all my life I thought my mom yelled at me a lot. And I thought it really affected my life. So the belief I had, you're working on the belief. My mom yells. Not much, but it really affected me. So Katie goes, the first question is it true? So I look at it and I go, yeah, it's true. She yells, you know. So then the second question is, can you really know that it's true? So when she asked me the second question, my New York sarcastic brain went, some enlightened being, didn't she hear me the first time? You know, but I went a little deeper, you know, and I go, is it really true? And I closed my eyes, and I remember asking my dad on their 50th anniversary, what do you owe 50 years of marriage to? And he goes, to having such a sweet, loving wife. And that time I think, really, is he married to someone else?
Yeah.
You know, because I thought she yelled at him way more than me, but that wasn't his perception. So when Katie asked me the second time, can I really know that it's true, the second question, I said no. So the third question is, how do I react when I think the thought my mother yells? So even as an adult, I would go there and visit them in a car, and when I'm there, I'm ready for war. I'm
Right.
defensive. I'd go to the door and say, she'd go, how are you? And I'd hear like, how the hell are you?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, when I think the thought that she yells, I'm ready to fight her. You know, it's you know, and I don't like her. So then the fourth question is, who would I be without the thought? So when you talk about moments that change your life, here I am in front of 70 people, and Katie goes, Don, who would you be without the thought? So I close my eyes, because the work is a meditation. It's like a talking meditation, but you go in deep. And I'm answering the question for my sake. There's no right answer. So I'm finding my truth. So when I closed my eyes, I saw my life go in front of them. And I saw my mom and me as a little boy, and she's going, eat your vegetables, you know. And then as you know, during the 60s and 70s, I was a hippie, long hair, beard, you know, dirty clothes, and my mom was always yelling at me, you should shave, you know, stuff like that. So in that moment, in front of 70 people, I became that actor and just started bawling, because I realized what I thought was yelling and being abused was my mom loving me. You know, and you know, then I realized that all those people that went before me had these wonderful revelations like I did.
Right.
So, you know, judge your neighbor, write it down, which I did. My mom yells, you write it on a piece of paper. Ask the 4 questions, which we did, and then turn it around. So the turnaround is, the original statement is, my mom yells. The turnaround would be, I yell. That could be one turnaround.
Right.
And I go find ways I yell. And of course I yell. As soon as she said a word to me, I yelled right back at her.
Yeah, right.
You know, and even as an adult, if someone irritated me, I yell. So, you know, again, you were talking about the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my mom yells, who's yelling? I'm yelling, you know. And then you find another turnaround if there's usually a couple of turnarounds, but in this case, my mom yells is the original statement. So the turnaround would be, my mom doesn't yell. And that's just as true. I called it yelling. She called it mothering, doing what she knew best,
Right.
loving her son,
Yeah.
caring about him. So you could see just, you know, in that simple little example, how 4 questions and a turnaround changed my life.
So do you do it on, like, the next time you do that exercise, does it naturally go to a deeper level?
You might have to do, like, I think I was ready that, because that really changed my life with my mom. You know,
Right.
I had been to therapy for years, and, you know, that really didn't work at all.
Yeah, and you could see the relationship energy shift after that?
My mom didn't change.
No,
Yeah.
you did.
Yes, so, like, when I'd go visit her and I'd hear what I would used to call yelling,
Yeah,
I mean, I just put my arm around her and kiss her,
yeah,
because I knew that's the way she was loving me. She was doing what she knew to do.
yeah.
I called it yelling, she called it mothering.
And because of your perception, you had walls up, and after the work, the walls came down, and you could see that it really was, it came more from love than anger
Yeah,
to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I know that you've had some experience with the Zenus products. Um, you were taking the Asiniac.
Mostly that, yeah, and a detox, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you've done other types of work for your health. Where are you with that today?
Well, you know, I've been taking the Asiniac, which was Casey, the nurse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was that wonderful video which I brought forth to you guys.
Right,
I
right.
think it was Hoxley
Hoxie,
and
the Gearson.
Pearson, and was she a doctor? She was a nurse. Was she Dr. Casey?
Dr. Renee Case.
Dr. Renee Case, yeah. So I just remember seeing that, and you guys had the product also.
Yeah.
And, you know, the irony about that video, it's a documentary. It's a factual video.
Yeah.
And back then, you could just go and watch it on the internet, and as you informed me, you can't find it
No,
now.
you know, it's interesting. When you forwarded that email to me, I must have sent that to 50 people, you know. And not everybody watched it. That, you know, they said they wanted to. I don't know how many watched it, and I watched it. But then all of a sudden, it wasn't available.
Yeah.
And it's strange because it would seem that something like that was sent out, and I'm not a technical guy, but it seems funny that you could email something in a format, and how that became unavailable.
Now it disappears.
Yeah.
You told me, and I went back to the email, and I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did, the organization that sent that out originally, I did find them, so it's on my list to do is to see if people can still get copies. We have a copy of that here. In fact, we had a showing of it
Yeah.
here at Zenus a couple months ago. We had a pretty good turnout.
Yeah,
too.
I went to that. I was there for that.
Yeah.
Well, the first one, I think you showed it a couple of times. haven't
Yeah.
you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know, I guess I never watched the tail end of it, but when it started to get into the baking soda remedies and some of that's every bit as interesting. So they really go into about 5 or 6 alternative cancer therapies. You know, the Gearson, the Hoxie, and the Essiac are the main 3.
Yeah.
But they get into, at the tail end, they bring in like 3 or 4 other people that have a different approach.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it disappears.
Yeah, right.
You know, the other part, which, as far as back to the work, I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm finding, and you know, I was diagnosed a couple of years ago
Yeah.
with prostate. I don't even like to say the word anymore,
Right.
because you hear that word, and especially me, and I was kind of educated more of a holistic world, but as soon as I heard the word fear entered my body, you know, and then, God, you watch the news and you hear, I mean, it's just fear, fear, fear.
Yeah.
And thank God I had to work. It took me a while, because I think 6 months I was in a panic, you know, and I have thoughts that enter my mind, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to be incontinent. I'm going to be impotent. So, you know, because you hear all these side effects of being treated for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's probably not the cancer, it's the side effects of being treated for them.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. So, you know, lately I've been involving myself with doing the work with people who have been diagnosed with any kind of disease. Because here I was trying to heal myself, taking holistic remedies, but the thoughts I was having, the stress in my body was making it acidic.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I honestly, even though I eat healthy, I think if you're stress-free and eat junk food, you'd live a healthy life, as opposed to if you have lots of stress and you eat really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the work, the way I'm seeing it now, it's like, how could I help people question those thoughts which are causing stress in their life?
Right. Well, the nice thing about you having gone through it personally, when you talk to people that might be sick, they might be battling this or that. The thing that it really I love to see is when two people share their experience with the other. All of a sudden, if the person was not exposed to alternative therapies before, maybe he or she always thought of them as kind of quackery or really off the wall. When they meet a human being that has actually done it, that gives a lot of freedom and a lot of power to just that little bit of education that you share with them. That gives them strength, I think. You know, there's tremendous power in that.
Well, you know, I heard people say it, and it sounds kind of cliche, but it's like the gift of cancer.
Yeah.
You know, and thank God. I mean, mine's limited to an area of my body. It's pretty much, some of it is dissolving already. There's still a few more spots. It's not a panic thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's not like stage 4 or anything. But still, when you hear that word, it panics you.
Yeah.
You know. So in saying that, I was able to take, you know, I come from a place of, yes, I have experienced that, and the thoughts that I was having was causing me more stress than anything at that point.
Right.
So you do the work. Is it true? Is it true I'm going to be incontinent?
Yeah.
You know, many years ago, when I was traveling with Katie in the early days, I remember going up to, I think it was Sausalito, up in that area, and it was a community center, and there was a gentleman got on stage, and this was before I had prostate cancer, and he did it on cancer. And Katie said to him, "Is it true you have prostate cancer?" And he goes, "Yes." "Can you really know it?" And he goes, "Yes." She goes, "Well, how do you know that?" He goes, "Well, the doctors tell me." She goes, "How do you feel today?" "Fine." "Are you having sex regularly?" "Yes." "Are you incontinent?" "No." And then so she said to him again, "Is it true you have prostate cancer?" And he goes, "No." You know, so it's like just that simple.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden it's like, I'm fine now. But when you get all the diagnosis, and you get what's going to happen to you if you do that, you know, there's a chance of this happen if you do chemo, this if you do this. The next thing you know, you're doing it.
Yeah.
And this gentleman was doing it, and he was perfectly healthy. You don't even have to be incontinent or impotent, but you start thinking about these things, you're there.
Before we forget, for those that are watching and listening, if they want to get in touch with you to maybe go through this process with you, tell them how they can do that.
DonVacca.com, DonVacca.com.
Okay.
That's my website, and then my email and all my information's on that.
Right. And do you prefer to work with people, it might be a health issue, it might be an emotional issue, it might be maybe they have money issues or relationship issues. Do you kind of specialize, or does it matter?
You know, I'm trying to focus. You know, I presented it. It works on everything really well. You know,
it sounds like it would.
And the money thing was, I mean, I was retired at one time, and the crunch 3-4 years ago, I lost 90% of what I had, which added to the stress. So, you know, I had thoughts about money. All of a sudden, my God, I'm going to be homeless. There's a thought. You live with that thought too often.
Yeah.
You know, you're stressed out, and the next thing you know, you're homeless because you can't function because you got yourself all tensed up over a thought.
And you bought into that belief, right?
I bought into that
What's
belief.
that old saying, that which I have feared has come to be?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you don't just specialize in health issues so much.
No, I like relationships, because you know, and usually the person you're with is your biggest mirror.
Right.
You know, I'm married to a beautiful woman, and there were certain things that drove me crazy about her, and I thank God they did.
Yeah.
You know, and in the beginning, of course, it was her.
Yeah.
You know, and then you come to do the work, and you know.
And has she done it with you?
She did it occasionally, and now everyone around her seems to be doing it. So maybe because I do it, she's a little resistant to it.
Yeah.
When she was doing it, she was really happier.
Yeah.
You know, but I can't. I don't. It's not my job to say who needs to do it.
Yeah.
When I first started, I thought everyone needed to do it, so I kept doing it more. If I think you need to do it, Bobby, I need to do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a story. One time we were at a workshop, and there was a woman doing the work with Katie, and she was a prostitute. And you know how Katie turns to the audience and she goes, "Is this you?" And the audience looks at her like, "What, are you kidding? I'm not a prostitute." And Katie goes, "Oh, really? How many times do you say yes to get what you want when you want to say no?" How many times do you prostitute yourself? So like when there's a turnaround and you might not see it, just look a little deeper, because we all are prostitutes in times of our lives to get what we want. So that's a tricky thing, like, ask for, judge your neighbor, write it down, ask 4 questions, and then turn it around. And like with my wife, many times I'd see things and I'm like, a better example would be, I've done it with women who are just these nurturing mothers, and they go, Dawn, am I, aren't I a good mother? And I go, no. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, how do you mother yourself? So it's like, just go deeper and see what you're seeing in another person. They might be looking at another woman and going, she's a terrible mother. Well, where are you a terrible mother? Well, not to my kids, but to myself. So if you see something in another person, the only reason you could see it is because somewhere you've either done it or you're still doing it.
Right. Now, I know you've told me in the past that you do a fair amount of life coaching. Is the work an integral part of that, or is that something separate?
It's totally it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I call myself a life coach. I've gone to therapy for years when I was younger. And I've seen miracles happen in 1 and 2 sessions of the work. You can't use the word therapy, but I know for a fact there are a lot of therapists that have gone to the school for the work and they use it in their practice.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. It's 4 questions and a turnaround. How could that work?
Yeah.
And like I said, I was the skeptic sitting in Barstow looking at these people thinking this is a bunch of BS. There's no way.
Right.
And then when I got on that stage and saw my mother from a different perspective, and at that point, like people say, you forgive your mother. There was nothing to forgive.
Yeah.
What she did the best she knew how to do.
Yeah.
And thank God she did that.
Yeah, and people that mother or father a certain way, they learn that from their father or mother. So everything, I love when I meet somebody and it seems like they've maybe broken that pattern. Like
Oh God, yeah.
people that come from abusive families, 9 times out of 10, for some reason they end up in abusive relationships. So it's great when you see somebody able to break that pattern and stop that progression. Otherwise, it's a generational thing.
Yeah. Can you imagine in a world, if we lived in a world where people actually looked at themselves as opposed to blaming outside themselves? I mean, countries do this.
Yeah.
It's like, what we say, oh, this country's killing a lot of people. Well, then we go in and bomb the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Who's the killers?
Yeah.
It's like, so, like, judge your neighbor, but then look at yourself. Turn it around, because the only reason you're seeing bad people is because there's something in you that's bad.
As we're sitting here, I'm thinking it might be kind of a nice thing to do. We have meeting space here. It might be fun to get a group of people together that want to learn more about the work, and you could just kind of do like a primer
workshop.
And show, just kind of give people a sample of what they could expect, and then can you do it in a group?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I traveled enough with Katie in the beginning. You'd walk into a community center.
Yeah.
There'd be this little card on each chair, and it would just have a one-line thing: blank should or shouldn't blank. So my wife should be more loving. So then I'd raise my hand, and Katie would go, "Is it true?" And I should be more loving. I should be more loving to her. I should be more loving. I should be more loving to myself. If I think you should be more loving to me, Bobby, I need more to love myself more.
Yeah.
So that's the way she used to do it, and you'd be surprised. People raise up their hand, and so if we have people that want to do that, the other way we could go in and we could just write the 4 questions, show it how it's done, give examples, but it's so much more powerful if someone just comes, raise their hands, and says, I'm upset with so and so because.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you ever find out
and my wife is very loving, by the way. I just use that as an example.
And I've met your wife. She used to join you at the homeless feeds.
Yeah.
And she's a delight. I wanted to find out, did Katie ever talk about where the inspiration came from? Was it?
Well,
does she think it was just divine intervention?
No. Well, as I said earlier, when she was in that halfway house rehab center, and she walked up on the floor with a bug on her foot, and she had no memory of the former 44 years. So when they say something, that's where the work, I think, my understanding is that's where the work developed. It was like she would question everything. Is it true? I mean, it's interesting because just imagine one day you're Bobby and next day you're not Bobby. You're someone else.
And you have no reference
No
point.
reference points.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she even said she had to learn a lot of the language. She didn't know her children. They had to fill this all in. So from it, the work evolved, and then people would knock on a door in Barstow. The next thing you know, she bought the house next door and now house next door, and then it just grew. And it was always by invitation and donation in the beginning. And now you pay for the schools, but and she certifies people, so this work goes on. And it's a pretty strict certification program she has right now. It's not easy, but it's just to keep it in its essence of what it is.
Yeah.
And
do you have to go to her to be certified, or can you do it online?
No, I don't think but you go there. I think you have to go to the school. I'm not sure. And online, it's constantly online education.
Yeah.
And you work with other people in the work. It's pretty good.
Well, and I've been fortunate to have guests on this show. In fact, Christine Contini, who you introduced me to years ago, she's fond of saying, what's blocking you. You may not even really know, what's blocking you, but we all have blocks. This sounds like a really simple, which I like. I like things simple, way to get rid of the blocks. Tell me a couple examples of some of the more dramatic shifts that you've witnessed.
Oh my God! One I'll never forget was a gentleman. He was actually living in Ventura, and he was kind of a rugged guy, And he was on his 20th wedding anniversary with his wife, and I think they were driving in an RV, and he was sleeping in the back, and the next thing he wakes up, and they were in an accident, and his wife is dead. So he comes to one of the workshops, and he's up on stage doing the work on his wife dying, and he broke down and everything. And by the end of that thing, the end of the experience of doing the work, I mean, this guy was at peace. It was amazing because it was like his wife wouldn't want him to suffer.
Right.
And death is an interesting thing to do it on because, the reality is they're dead. Katie, what she says a lot, I've heard her say, is you fight with reality, you lose.
Yeah.
So to sit there and say, my wife shouldn't have died is insane.
Yeah.
It's not saying you're glad, but the reality is she's dead. I mean, even when I lost all my money, my accountant said to me, he goes, how come you didn't kill yourself? Because, the reality is my money was gone. And for a couple of hours, I didn't do it right away, but it took less than a day to realize I could sit here and go, it shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. Or I could accept it.
Right.
And who knows, what came of that is, who knows where that leads to. I got stressed, the cancer comes, and maybe I've taken a path which is, the best path for me. Well, I definitely took the path that's the best path for me.
Yeah. Well, I know from experience, sickness is tough. Death is tough. The end of a relationship can be very devastating. A friend of mine shared with me once, I was having a hard time accepting something, and I just could not come to peace with it. And, I respect this guy, and I asked him, I said, what, I just really don't want to be in this place. And he goes, you're just in a place of change, and it's not the shift that's painful, it's your resistance to the change.
The thoughts you're having about the same exact
that's
thing.
Where that pain is.
Yeah,
it's your resistance.
Yeah.
So the more we can just be in the moment and accept things, like the example you gave of the guy whose wife passed away. I've lost some pets over the years, and people trivialize that sometimes. I'm telling you, it was very, very difficult. Do you know I actually had people come up to me, and because they care, just put their hand on my shoulder and say, Bobby, I'm so sorry you're hurting like this. The way you're feeling now is why I don't have pets. And I couldn't see it that way.
Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Well,
they didn't see that.
I mean, not that everything in life should be a scale, but But if it was the joy and love that you got from
yeah.
that pet versus the grief that you, I mean, it's not even close to me.
Well, Bobby, how many people don't get involved in emotional relationships?
Yeah.
You know, for that reason. I mean,
Same.
I meet so many women right now who are doing the work, and it's like the nurturing, wonderful part of a woman is not there. Their hearts are all covered up because they don't want to risk being hurt. But the truth is, instead of having, maybe you fall in love and you get hurt.
Yeah.
They're hurting themselves every day by not experiencing the love that they could have in their hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are, they're scared, you know. And what happens is, it's never, I had a girlfriend leave me. She was supposedly my soulmate. And, you know, one day I said, we need to do something because we're arguing a lot. I thought we'd go to therapy. And she said, okay, I'll get up. And she left. And I was devastated. And this was, I think, right before I got into the work. But
Yeah.
the truth is, 6 months later, I look back and, you know, it was a wonderful thing that she left. So if I would have known the work and thought, oh, she shouldn't have left me, and did the work, I would have realized at that point the only thing was killing me was this thought that she shouldn't have left me.
Yeah.
And once she was gone, my God, it opened my life to a whole different, you know, lifestyle.
Yeah. I've been reading a book off and on, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and one of his quotes in there is, everything will be okay when I'm okay with everything. And I just love that.
Loving what is, accepting reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that simplicity. Maybe it's this simple mind that resonates with those simple things. Because if it gets too deep, sometimes it just goes over my head. But that
A simple
statement,
mind is a gift, Bobby. That's the sign of real knowledge,
Yeah.
real wisdom.
Yeah.
We complicate things.
So in addition to, I'm sure with the financial situation the country's been in, I bet you've had an opportunity to work with people in job transitions and things like that.
Yeah, because in believing you know what's best for yourself, that's great as long as it happens.
Yeah, right.
You know, so then what it does, you know, people who are more religious people, the expression let go and let God. You know, if something happens, give it over to God. We don't know why something happens, but if I keep pushing to have something happen that I want and it's not, that's painful.
Yeah.
You know, so letting go and letting God is a nice way to live.
Yeah. And do you have any workshops scheduled?
There's a place here in town called Zenme over in Henderson, and we're doing one a week from Saturday
Okay.
at 2 p.m. Zenme, just so you could Google it.
Okay.
And it's going to be working mostly with people who have weight issues, because everyone has a program for losing weight, and they all work, but then they all seem to fall back.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's get to the thoughts, the underlying causes that's really causing your weight.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's so funny you say that, because we were talking in the office earlier today about obesity and it's like an epidemic in this country, and I think I have food addiction issues. A lot of people have. I think food addiction may be the most underreported addiction in this country.
Everybody talks the biggest one.
Yeah, everybody talks about gambling, alcohol, drugs. You don't hear much talk about food addiction, and it's surprising to me, because I think it truly is an addiction, and if it really is, the odds of someone kicking an addiction by yourself is so slim. It's every now and then you'll hear somebody do it successfully, but when you look at food as an addiction, I think people need to cut themselves some slack and realize that it is an addiction in a lot of cases, and realize that most addictions can't be beat on your own. You need that support group.
Yeah.
I was telling a couple friends earlier today that now I'm no expert, but I've been to Weight Watchers, and I know a little bit about Overeaters Anonymous, and I thought those two together could be a great combination, because the Weight Watchers gives you a little bit of a food plan, and the Overeaters Anonymous kind of addresses the ism. What is that within you that you're trying to fill with the food? And how will this workshop go?
Well, the first part will be about nutrition.
Yeah.
Julie Sanders, she's a nutritionist, and she'll be doing that. And then the second part is, which I believe is a new way of dealing this, It's what's causing you to put the food in the mouth. What thoughts are you having when you go for that chocolate?
Right.
You know, and it could be just as simple as I love chocolate. I love it.
Yeah.
You almost like you think it's good for you. You do the work on it, and you'll find that chocolate is probably killing you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it's not the chocolate; it's the sweetness, the
Yeah.
sugar. You know, so that aspect of it is, you know, Weight Watchers. All these programs are great, but are they dealing with the emotional thing? And it could be something your father said to you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
The woman that I'm doing this with, we did a practice run for the workshop, and
Yeah.
we were sitting there at Starbucks. I was telling you that earlier, and she just did it on something in her life. And the next thing you know, and this woman's kind of kicked the eating habit, but she still falls back in times when she's feeling stressed, and she'll eat sugar. So here we are in Starbucks, and she does the work, and she has this revelation, starts crying. So even in a practice session, it turned out to be very real. You know, what thoughts are you having? What's causing you to do it? What did someone say to you,
Yeah.
you know, many years ago? And you get that, then you shift. And when you talk about addictions, and all the addictions, you could somehow stay away from them. But in this society, when you watch television, I mean, the pushers are everywhere.
Right.
And it's either processed or sugar.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you really got to be strong. So let's get to the cause that's even starting the addiction. Then, you know, I look at food now, I'm kind of boring.
No, but you really, what you say you do. I mean, you're not just talking the talk, you're doing it.
Yeah, people, it's weird. I'm such a good eater that when I go out to dinner, people rationalize what they're ordering.
Yeah.
I don't say a word. It's like, you can eat all the sugar you want, but I feel like a priest, you know, like, bless
Yeah.
me, Father, for our
Yeah.
sins.
I don't know if you ever watched, there's a show on CBS Sunday Morning called just that, CBS Sunday Morning.
I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah, and years ago they did a food study, and they wire these people's brains with the electrodes, and then they gave them their favorite food, and then they charted the brain activity, right? And then they marked it down. Then they took that favorite food away from them, and they charted that activity. Do you know that the same exact part of the brain that a cocaine addict gets excited, got excited with the food? And what I found even more interesting was, you know how they can gauge intensity by color? It was the same color
Wow.
as a cocaine addict when they took the cocaine away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where when I watched that, this is many years ago, that's when I first started to realize, hey, that food is an addiction,
Oh,
you know?
God, yeah.
And I feel sorry for people that keep kicking themselves because it's lack of self-control. Well, if it's an addiction, your odds of beating it on your own, very few people can do it. That you need a support system of some
Yeah.
kind. So I applaud you with this workshop, and tell us again where it is, and they can get to you by donvaca.com.
Just get to me, yeah.
Is that event on your site?
No, but I'll try to get it up there.
Okay.
Just email me. My email's there. It's very simple.
And are you comfortable giving out your number?
Sure.
Yeah, why don't you give the listener...
917-545-9185 or don5454@gmail. A
Okay.
simple email address. Isn't that amazing?
Give that out again.
don5454@gmail.com.
Okay. And this is at ZenMe, is it called?
ZenMe.
Okay, and that's where...
ZEN. It's in Henderson up towards Anthem.
And that's on your, or will be on your website.
Yeah, or if I don't get it up in time, just email me.
Okay, very good. Well, listen, thanks so much for coming
A
in. We'll have to
pleasure,
have you
Bobby.
back. And once again, this show was dedicated to our hero, Bibi.
Super dog.
Just turned 17, and she's just a delight. I really want to invite anybody that wants to meet her. She's just a treat. And Don's in here quite often, and we'll try to put some feelers out and see if some people would be coming in so you can do a little demo on what your workshops are
Especially
like.
since we're talking about wellness, and I want to help those people who go into fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks a million.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay.
Mother Nature has the answer to all the things we need. It is in the purest waters